So Jared Macken interests me in a way because if you look at his criminality, he is essentially most of his career been a heavy for hire. He was linked in with the INLA. He was at one point jailed for nailing a man to a kitchen floor, a highly violent guy. But then there's this totally other side to him where he is this family man, where he seems to have had and enjoyed a very stable, loving relationship for years and years and years, where he has the support of his wife or partner. He has children, and he has recently celebrated a family christening. But the reason we're talking about it is because he's shown up out in Spain, in Alicante, in the heart of all the action, rubbing shoulders with the very many Irish criminals who seem to be out there at the moment. And we understand that he's living around La Zina, which is the same area where John George was murdered, where John Gilligan was picked up on the pink cocaine charge. And they appear to be settled and living out there full time. I said it to you before and I say it again, Alicante is the new Costa del Crime.
Totally it is. Obviously for ages it seemed to be based around Porta Banús, but a lot of the Irish and the UK criminals are ending up in Alicante now, and it has become a political issue, as we said before. The number of shootings, drug seizures, the fact that there's expat criminals involved, mostly Irish and English, but of many others as well. We've done stories about Italian on-the-run criminals living in that area. So yeah, it's heating up.
It certainly is. Now, Macken is originally from Belfast. He was initially convicted of a murder and then he was released on appeal, acquitted. Do you have the detail of that and do you remember?
Yeah, so Jared Macken was from Belfast and he became involved, it is believed, with dissident organisations. The Continuity IRA was the first grouping he was linked to, and ultimately he was then linked to the INLA. He was tried for the murder of a guy called Edward Burns, a taxi driver.
That's right, yeah.
And it was a unique case in that he was prosecuted in the South.
In the Special Criminal Court.
The Special Criminal Court. He was convicted originally in 2008 in Dublin. It was a new, rarely used, it's described as a cross-border anti-terrorism law. So that allowed people to be prosecuted.
And was that because at that point he was living down here? So that was when, 2008? That
was 2008 he was convicted.
Now he's just in around 40, so he would have been born in around, what, 1990?
Well, I suppose it'd be more likely to be 1985, would it be?
So just edit that because it's bad enough.
No, leave that in.
No.
Go on, leave that.
Please, Jason, NASA, save me from myself.
Go on.
Anyway, so I'll just in case they do, they probably will leave it in. Actually, feck it, leave it in. People know how bad I am at the maths. But he's sort of born around 1985 because I was going to say even by the turn of the century, even by 2000, he's still only 15 then.
He is.
Thank you. Thank you. Leave that in.
So what So obviously
So, by 2008, sorry, this is my point, while he's in the Special Criminal Court and there's this, they're using this laws that you can prosecute in the South, he's only 22.
He's only 22, and I suppose what he would be what was described as peacetime soldiers when it came to republicanism. So these were guys who became involved in armed republicanism, I suppose.
He was 23.
What? So
it's like a disease, isn't it?
Like a disease.
He's 23.
So they became involved in these groupings post-ceasefire. So it's a funny kind of thing, if you know what I mean. The Provisional IRA had obviously, at least mostly, packed up their bags. But there was a group of young men who became involved in these movements in the aftermath of the ceasefire. And Jared Macken had a really big reputation as a dangerous person. So he was tried, but that conviction was quashed on appeal.
Yeah.
Then he was put on trial again in 2011, and ultimately that dramatically collapsed in the Special Criminal Court, and the state entered what's called a null prosequi.
And do you recall why that trial collapsed at the time? What was the detail of that?
Well, it opened and we heard opening statements and we heard some initial evidence, I think, from the Gardaí at the time, but ultimately a central bit of the case was based on a prosecution witness, and at the point during the trial, the prosecution witness refused to give evidence and said he was in fear for his life. And
there we go, of course. It was a guy called Damien O'Neill, and he told the judges that I've been threatened that if I give evidence, I will be shot dead. He said he had been visited and threatened twice in recent weeks by men from the Republican movement. Now, Macken was at this point 28, and his address is White Rock, West Belfast. But he, at this point, has also got an address in Tallaght in Dublin. Because, of course, he was based here. And in the aftermath of that acquittal, really, and that trial collapsing, he moves between Dublin and Limerick, where he sort of hires himself out under the banner of being a member of the INLA, be it the new INLA, the new INLA, whatever it is. And he is basically sort of a freelance, heavy for hire as such.
Yeah, and primarily he's in Limerick, actually.
Yeah.
Like he does absolutely move between Dublin. He has an address in Tallaght. He's also associated with some really people that would ultimately become infamous, like Johnny Keogh, like Eamon Cumberton, two men that are serving life sentences for Hutch Kinahan murders. They were called the new...
And Nicky McConnell.
And Nicky McConnell. And these are all, and along with Jared Macken, they're called the new INLA. And Macken, of course, had been charged with membership of the INLA at one point. There was second null prosequi was entered on that charge as well in 2013. But by the time the new INLA come to prominence, if you want, they're not a political organisation at all. What you have is a group of people who had been associated with the INLA, who are solely operating as gangland enforcers. Johnny Keogh had served a sentence in connection with
pipe bombs
for the INLA, but at this stage they're not even pretending to operate as a political organisation. So Macken really goes down to Limerick primarily.
Yeah.
And he becomes associated with people from the Keane faction. Very much a close associate of Kieran Keane Jr., who we've spoken about in recent times on this podcast, socialises with him, certainly is close friends with him.
Or, you know, that blurs into a little bit of business, doesn't it? Because, of course, Macken is selling himself as being the guy you can send out if you're owed a debt. If anyone crosses you, you know, you can pay me some money and I will go and act the heavy. Macken is a really big, sort of scary looking guy, you know. He's a kind of a redhead when he has hair on his head, but he often is sort of balding, and he has this kind of peculiar sort of wrinkled almost skull. I always reckon he looks as if his brain operates on the outside of his body rather than inside it. But anyway, the fact is that Macken is knocking around with these guys. There's a friendship, but there's also a business relationship. He's there for a reason because he's of use to them.
Yes, and of course he has a really, really heavy reputation. Partly, some of it at least, is driven by the fact that he ultimately will be convicted and jailed in connection with it, like a crucifixion. Where
and the collapse of the trial in Dublin, because the key prosecution witness is threatened and is visited at his home, isn't exactly sort of, you know, you're not walking out of that court washed in the blood of the Lamb, are you, thinking, you know, this was a wrongful charge to take in the first place. This is a prosecution witness is terrorised. The whole point of the Special Criminal Court being in existence is to sort of, I suppose, protect witnesses, protect juries, because there are no juries there, and to kind of be open-minded to the idea that organised crime will protect itself at any means.
Yeah, and you know, there is a justification for being afraid of Jared Macken. You know, the crucifixion occurs in County Limerick. A man in his 50s is nailed to the kitchen floor with a nail gun. Macken and a couple of others ultimately will be jailed for assault. But I mean, this is again, you know, about collecting money and acting as, you know, being somebody that will terrify.
Was there not a scene like that in the General?
But there was a scene like that where a guy was crucified to a pool table, I think, or a snooker table. So it is a tactic that has been used before. But Macken then ends
So Macken ends up in jail, doesn't he then?
Yeah, he ends up in Castlereagh, where, again, he becomes one of those figures that are feared within the jail
Within the
system.
prison system.
Yeah.
And I suppose on the outside at this point, you're coming up to 2016 to the big rivalry of the Hutch and the Kinahan forces and to the Regency Hotel atrocity. And you have then, in the aftermath of that, Kinahan money in particular being, pumped into Dublin for anybody who's willing to take on or take out a Hutch rival. The Kinahans are desperate to re-establish their power. They start hiring freelance operators as well as having their own in-house hit teams. And some of those operators they hire are Macken's former friends, Johnny Keogh, Eamon Cumberton and Nicky McConnell. There was pictures actually on Facebook, I think on open Facebook forums at that time, of the four of them standing together. You know, they're out, they're buddies, they're here together. Of course, cos Macken's in prison, he can't take up that early blood money from the Kinahans. Not that he doesn't want to, because as we see later, he does find himself within their company and probably on that payroll. But at that time, he's locked up, and on the outside, Johnny Keogh, Nicky McConnell take on board the job to murder Gareth Hutch, both of whom are convicted of that. Eamon Cumberton is the man in the mask that goes into the Sunset pub and murders Michael Barr. And Macken has to stew it out in prison with all this money on offer.
Yeah, but he does come out, and when he comes out, he again starts to appear in Dublin on a more regular basis. Some of the other guys, for example, Nicky McConnell heads off to Turkey to avoid Garda investigations. So Macken puts himself in the middle of it again, and he is based around the Pearse Street area at some stage, and he's spotted in the company of Caelan Smith. Caelan Smith is, a young guy who's associated with the one of the Kulak gangs led by Sean Little, but he's also associated with the Kinahans, and he is ultimately convicted for a hit attempt on Michael Gately. So Macken is in that mix.
And he's so far, I remember, so you're coming up to really about 2018 at this point, and you have the dismantling is underway of the Kinahan organisation by the Gardaí. You have these younger guys. You mentioned the Sean Little crew out in Coolock. They're a young group of dealers who believe the Kinahan name still holds sway. They kind of elbow their way into situations and end up, catastrophe really happens there. There's a number of murders. But there's a guy in the middle of that mix called Hamid Sanambar, and he is wasn't he? Where was he from originally?
He was from Iran, wasn't he?
He was Iranian, was he?
Yes, he was.
But he sort of starts appearing with all these young guys. And I recall at one stage, he and Macken are seen together. And of course, the rumours about Sanambar are that he is an ISIS-trained hitman who has beheaded people,
right,
who is sent to Dublin by Daniel Kinahan to finish off his rivals. Now, that obviously was a story that went out and about and was put out presumably by the people he was hanging around with and protecting, because things were dangerous at that stage. Hamid Sanambar was none such thing. In actual fact, he was a kind of 40-year-old misfit who had been floating around Ireland for quite some time, had a previous conviction for stealing from women in a brothel.
Yeah.
And small-time crook who sort of spoofed his way into that gang as an enforcer, had teardrop tattoos on his face to suggest that he was an assassin himself. And he basically was knocking around. But they were these two characters. I remember Macken and him and seeing them together, and there was this really tense feeling like, what would they be capable of? You really wouldn't have liked to have met them in an alley on a dark night, you know. But of course, Macken is right in the middle of those.
He is, and the guards.
Sanambar, of course, is killed.
Sanambar is killed. At some point, the killings start to slow. The Garda investigation starts to catch up with the violence. People start going on the run, leaving the country. People like Trevor Byrne, other people that have been really prominent at the start. Obviously, others left the country totally and have never returned. And so it starts to slow down, and Jared Macken starts to really return to Limerick, where his real ties are, I suppose. But he remains a prime target for Gardaí, who continued to see him socialising with members of the Keane faction. And in 2019, he's stopped in Raybogue Road and he is caught with cash.
Not an enormous amount of cash, in fairness.
No, €4,780.
Would be quite a lot to me. I'm just saying, in criminal terms, you end up being quite ridiculous about this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not like tens of thousands that this guy has in his possession. But nonetheless, he is arrested.
He's arrested.
And he's criminally investigated for basically this being the proceeds of criminal behaviour. So money laundering, in other words.
Money laundering. And he's also, when the cash is found, it's also, it's wrapped up with an encrypted phone. So that also becomes part of this case that's brought against him, where, you know, he has to justify having the money, and part of that justification will have to explain why he would have an encrypted phone, which simply most people don't have.
So he lands himself in prison again. Now, not before this arrest, by the way, he has visited Dubai.
Yeah.
Do you recall that? That's when he's sort of doing a little bit of business with the Kinahans, and when, you know, the only reason he's needed is because so many have been locked up, and because so many, he won't have any loyalty from employers like the Kinahans, but he is summoned to Dubai, which gives him a sense of importance, and he feels pretty good about himself. Jailed for 3.5 years in relation to the possessing crime cash, essentially, and the phone. He appeals it, but he gets nowhere with that appeal.
No, because while awaiting trial, or as the investigation goes on, he gets out of the country, really. And at that point, he does effectively relocate to Spain.
To Alicante.
To the Alicante area. Now, as you said, in the broader scheme of things, it's a relatively small amount of money. But the guards continue to pursue the case. And they seek to have him extradited, and successfully ultimately have him extradited to face these charges, and he does go to prison. Now, obviously, you know, it probably shows that the importance they put on, you know, a zero tolerance approach to Macken. So he's extradited, and he serves that time in prison again.
And
what?
He's out.
He's out.
And he's back in Alicante.
Yeah.
And he is, the reason we're talking about him, has celebrated a family gathering there this weekend. Now, I understand that he has possibly purchased a property in the area.
Yeah.
Near Lazenia. Where would he get that money?
Well, I mean, the where he got his money, of course, featured in his appeal and in his trial. And the judge, during the appeal, dismissing the appeal against the length of sentence, he said that Macken told lies about the source of the money and the background, with initial suggestions that it came from the credit union, and later claims that it was from the appellant's work. However, they did note that he did have had an income, and that, you know, but this income in particular was the proceeds of crime. So yeah, he's out and about. You know, Alicante definitely has become a sort of a retirement ground, hasn't it, for some of these guys?
But I mean, is there enough money for them there? There's been quite a few of them that have really, okay, some of them are making a fortune. Look, you know, let's not be naive about it. But some of them aren't making a fortune. And they eventually do get washed up at some stage. And, you know, you look at Gilligan. He was once top of his game, and when he's arrested, he's living essentially, you know, in a nice apartment belonging to a girlfriend of his, but he's created a hovel around himself. He's street dealing. He is probably working for another gang of younger men, and yet he's 73. The pension just doesn't cut it for him, does it? You have others that are out there as well, like Fat Tony Armstrong, who's just about surviving. Like, they're not ever going to be millionaires. They're going to remain in the sort of the cesspit of organised crime, floating around as bottom feeders.
Yeah, I mean, the big money to be made for Irish criminals, for the most part, is in Ireland. I mean, they cornered the market over here, effectively. Now, the expat groupings, certainly some of them who managed to successfully become wholesalers, who use Spain as a base to transport large shipments. Of course, there's huge amounts of money to be made. But that mid-ranking that John Gilligan would have been in, they're really selling drugs to other expats. You know, it's not a
and
huge...
you have to wonder, like, is it a great place to be that you're so notorious? I mean, I think Macken is so distinctive looking.
Yeah.
He's so well known. It'd be very difficult for him to operate, to move around back in this country or in the north without being probably flagged, probably the UK as well. So you're out in Spain.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are certainly, even in the Limerick, say the Keane faction, there are people who've been based out in Spain and have stayed quite under the radar and have really
But they've probably got the money to do that, you know what I mean?
They have become...
You'd need to have banked quite a lot to just live off thin air.
Oh, totally. And those guys, there are a couple of them, and they have really become logistical importer-exporter types. Now, whether Jared Macken is of that mentality, I don't think he is. John Gilligan obviously certainly had done that at one stage in his career. But again, he's been less successful about it. And if you saw the charges where he was prosecuted for cannabis dealing, and there was also, as part of that trial, you heard about him sending prescription pills as well, though ultimately that wasn't deemed to be a criminal conviction. You know, it was relatively unsophisticated. It was really using the postal system to send stuff back. So therefore, you're talking about small amounts. And if one package gets seized, it'll probably be, you know, it's a write-off, but it'll be okay. So yeah, it's a funny business.
Well, I've no doubt we haven't heard the end of him, and he's not just retired into being a...
No, he's not gone.
Family man.
No, he's not gone and joined the Boy Scouts in Spain, I wouldn't imagine.
Right, okay, thanks.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.